States. In the United States, it is absolutely the case that poor people tend to have more children. There's also a racial or ethnic element to that as well, but this isn't a perfect one-to-one track. For instance, rural areas where the cities are drying up and dying, there are people who have lots of kids, sure, but they're not happy. I mean, we make, I guess, sort of reductive comments about white trash families, and I don't think that's fair, but it is certainly the case that, there are plenty of households out there where you have both many children and not a lot of happiness. I
Well,
just
then
think
this is another problem with the materialist worldview, Bosch. When you make this kind of bold claim, don't you think that economics really has a lot to do with whether or not people are having children? And then you cite that the poorest people are having the most amount of children, right? This is a very strange argument from you. So I'm hoping that you can qualify this and make this make sense to me.
I don't think anything that I said there doesn't make sense. The characteristics that might lead a person to have a lot of children are incredibly complicated. I mean, if you want a full rundown, it correlates more often to people who are poorer, I imagine, because people who are poorer often have a harder time with regards to family planning and management. They also have less strict life plans when it comes to their own career.
They're also more religious.
Sometimes, but that
Most of the
doesn't.
time.
But they're not the happiest. In fact, there's a very large degree of opioid addiction and unhappiness in highly religious rural communities with lots of children. So it's almost like your attempt to reduce these variables to some kind of simple correlative line doesn't actually work when you look at the reality.
Okay. Well, first of all, backing up, you and I have both agreed already that it's multifaceted, right? I'll agree that that's true, but that doesn't mean that some variables aren't far more important than others, which is why you cited an economic variable to begin with. Moving into this, when you're talking about this portion of the topic, which is birth rates, which have become absolutely disastrous everywhere, not just in the West, but globally. This was all due to anti-natalist campaigning from
What's
leftists.
disastrous about our birth rates?
They're in free fall collapse.
They've lowered as they have in every industrialized country, sure.
No, in all countries. Almost all countries everywhere, with the exception of a few African nations and Middle Eastern nations, and those are dropping off quickly.
Yes, industrialized countries produce fewer children because they no longer need 8 little tykes to run the farm, of course.
Well, no, that's not the only reason that we have a collapse in birth rate. It's because women are getting married older instead of younger. Now, you could
They
make
get
the
an
argument.
education.
Well, you could make the argument that this is due to, better family planning or something like this, I suppose. But still, ultimately, if you want to keep your population high, thus keeping your economy good, in all nations on planet Earth, you can't just ship around people who don't exist because the birth rate's lower everywhere. How do you plan? No, well, no, they're actually plateauing quickly. And the last UN report showed that, but the most modern UN report on population demographics, which I have in front of me, show that it's much more catastrophic than the UN previously predicted, citing that China, and this came in from a study from, sorry, it's on Forbes. I can link it over to you.
Is specific to the one-child policy. I think that was very dumb of the CCP. I'm talking about here in the West.
But a 500, they're talking about a 500 million reduction in the Chinese population, potentially by 2050, 2060. That's right around the corner. That's a massive population reduction. Japan, within 200 years, is actually slated to not exist. It's slated to not exist due to population.
So is the world population growing or decreasing right now?
Right now, it's plateauing.
The world population, as I understand it, is still growing at a decent
yes,
clip. I mean,
but it's plateauing.
Yes, sure, that's fine. We have a finite amount
and then
of space.
It free falls, and then it's projected to free fall by every UN analyst and by every scientific metric that you can possibly look at who has looked at this. It's expected to free fall and possibly stabilize at 6 billion in the next 150 years to 200 years. But the estimates.
What UN analyst? Yeah, I'd like to see that. Also, assuming that's the case, okay. I mean, it can't grow forever. Like, let's presume that information is accurate. If that seems fine. I mean, what should we have? 10, 12, 15
Well,
billion?
so here's why this is problematic, Bosch, because the Population Bomb, which was a book that was dropped all over the African nations and India in order to reduce the populations of those nations significantly, it turns out that was very problematic because, as it turns out, the more people you have, the more work gets done and the more people get fed. Right now, due to the increase in population, there is more global food production, the ability to deliver this food globally to people who need it, than there ever has been in human history. That's what happens with pro-natalist policies versus anti-natalist
Okay, wait.
policies.
You just answer the what population do you think it should stop at? So it might stop at 6 billion. What meaningfully is the difference
Oh,
between
I think that
stopping at 6
the
and
Earth
7?
would the Earth can easily, according to analysis, have up to 25, 30 billion people with pretty, it's pretty regular ease
Is that is
within
that
that confines of those numbers.
ideal? How is that better than what we have?
Because more
6
people equals more work, less starvation. Less
That's not.
starvation for populations, more work for infrastructure building, more work for, I mean, even
Yeah,
look at
but
the U.S.
fewer,
labor force now.
but
One of the
fewer
biggest
people
problems.
to cater to. This is very, very silly. The idea that everything gets better the more people are on Earth, it's just not the case. First of all, like the number of humans that are going to end up on the planet and like sort of plateau out at, that's not the same as our maximum carrying capacity. You don't want to hit the maximum carrying capacity for the same
Well, we're
reason that
nowhere near it.
yeah, I'm saying you don't
It's not
want
a
to.
problem.
And the reason for that is the same reason you don't want to hit the maximum carrying capacity of an elevator or a restaurant.
Yeah,
Maximum
but we don't even know
ideal.
what the maximum carrying